Welcome to All About Art. My name is Alexandra, and I'm an art historian, curator, and writer. Within this podcast, topics relating to art history, cultural policy, the art sector, as well as a large range of other art-related topics will be covered. Conducting critical discussions, having entertaining exchanges, or just enjoying some relaxing chats, All About Art is where you'll find it all. Join me in exploring and developing cultural discourse. Welcome, everybody, to today's episode of All About Art, where I'm going to be talking about viewing art online. Because of the coronavirus pandemic and multiple lockdowns, I think that we're all getting a little bit tired of viewing art online. Especially now, when things are starting to open up again, it feels like no one is really interested in taking part in any type of online art events. For months, for over a year, we've been inundated with images and information on a daily basis through social media, as well as having to socialize and work solely through our screens as well. Our attention spans are becoming shorter and shorter, and the prospect of us really enjoying artworks when looking at them online is, I think it's often taken away when they're presented in this really small format in such an ephemeral way, when you can slide your finger once and away it goes. Personally, I'm really not that interested in online viewing rooms anymore, and honestly, my computer doesn't seem to be either, because every time I enter one of these rooms, my Mac overheats and gets unbelievably slow. There have been exhibitions that have been presented via Zoom, though, where the curator or artist or gallerist has given a full tour of the show, giving information to each specific work of art, which is quite nice because although it is through a screen, you can still sit and learn about and contemplate the piece a little bit more than if you would have just seen the work scrolling on Instagram, for example. I feel like on Instagram, there's always this really fast-paced, only a couple of seconds, you spend time looking at it type of mentality. And that's with anything, that's not just with art. And something that I learned when doing my art history degree is that I think that it's really, really important that you spend some time with a work of art. I think that you can get so much more out of it when you really sit in front of a piece and when you take your time with it. I think that that can be incredibly rewarding. And I also think that it's one of the best ways to approach looking at art. I know that sometimes this can be a little bit difficult. Let's say if you're going through an entire exhibition and there are 10 rooms that you want to go see. And I personally find large exhibitions very, very exhausting because I want to make an effort to look at each piece, but I just don't feel like I have the emotional and mental energy to sit and really take my time with a piece. So I don't always practice what I'm preaching here right now by saying that, go and sit for hours in front of a piece. But for example, when I was writing about different pieces, I find that the longer I sat with them and the longer I just looked, instead of thought about different texts or theories or other things that just kind of come from when you do a degree within the arts, when I just looked at the piece, so many ideas and so much inspiration would come just from that. So that's actually something that I find really important when it comes to viewing art, namely the time that you spend with the piece and how you spend your time with it. Now that we're talking about viewing art in person, the theory from Walter Benjamin always pops into my mind. For those who don't know, Walter Benjamin was a philosopher and cultural critic, and within his publication called The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction, he writes about the aura of a work of art. This is always a very hot topic of discussion in the arts, and I always find it very interesting. Benjamin makes the distinction between a copy and an original, between an authentic work of art and what lies outside of this definition. He refers to what he calls the life of an artwork, of an authentic piece, and that it has to have a site of creation by the author or the artist. So basically, this whole physical aspect is something that was really, really important to his theory and was one of the largest contributions to what he believed to be the authenticity of a work of art. Taking a photo of a work and viewing it through technological reproduction, for example, on a computer, is a form of replication. These processes provide a viewer with alternative ways to approach the artwork, either through a lens or on a screen. But it is, according to Benjamin, not the authentic work of art and always remains a replica. I think that within his theory, it makes a lot of sense to say that you have the physical work of art, that is the authentic original piece that contains this aura, and then anything that comes after that, a photograph of the work and it being shared online or in any type of other technological reproduction, that is not the authentic piece. Benjamin continues with his theory of the aura and the embodiment of the quote-unquote here and now of the work of art, its unique existence in the place where it is at this moment. And that encompasses not only the creation of the object, but also its history, its physical conditions, and changes in ownership or location. He further maintains that technological reproduction reduces the aura, and that the object being reproduced becomes removed from the realm of tradition. So I guess he's basically saying that, sure, you may like this Basquiat that you saw in the museum the other day, but don't take a picture of it and don't share it on Instagram because that will reduce its aura. Now, this publication was written nearly a century ago, so let's just keep that in mind and continuously contextualize the situation and remember that it was written in that point in time. This aura is a result of the work belonging to a specific time and place and cannot be communicated through methods of technological reproduction. So again, with this whole time and place, this physical aspect of it was created here at this time from this person. So basically, we have Walter Benjamin on the one side saying that an authentic work of art is this physical piece that has this life, this point of creation, and this aura. So we can keep this in mind, but maybe not take it too seriously when we think about art in a contemporary context, which is very much involved with the internet. To consider a different point of view, David Josselit offers an opposition to Benjamin's theory of the aura by examining the theory within a post-digital context. He illustrates that Benjamin's analysis does not account for the drastic technological innovations within media, such as television, the internet, and cell phones, which have greatly influenced image production and circulation since Benjamin's essay was first published in 1936. Josselit argues that the value of a work is generated by replicability and not uniqueness. To explain further what he means by this, within the digital age, the framework in which art functions involves a multifaceted process of not only the creation of the object, but also its availability to be disseminated in spaces other than that in which it's physically displayed. I think that this is a really positive thing as well because it allows for works of art to be interacted with in a very accessible way because of its presence online. So it's something through, for example, social media that can become a part of our everyday life. So people can interact with art and culture a little bit more. Now, because of what I said earlier about how fast-paced the social media world is, that's not necessarily a positive thing when it comes to interacting with arts and culture, at least not from my point of view, because again, as I said earlier, interacting with a piece for a longer amount of time is something that I find quite intellectually stimulating, and I find it quite rewarding. At the same time, there are people who say that they don't think that art belongs on social media or that it doesn't belong online. For example, Walter Benjamin, or people who live in today's society as well. And I strongly disagree with that. I think that there should be methods and policies and different strategies in place to help people engage with culture more in the way that would be very rewarding, but also have them have access to it, which is something that's very easily done through social media. This means that nowadays it is important for a work of art to be able to be displayed within an online space. These forms of dissemination and display go against notions of tradition and the long-established systems to which the aura of an artwork conforms, in a way agreeing with arguments made by Benjamin. Simultaneously, though, Josselet demonstrates that the presence of the aura and this quote-unquote here and now, as defined by Benjamin, is no longer relevant within our specific age of art and technology. So what I'm saying is, Walter Benjamin is right in the way that it goes against traditional ideas of what art should do and how art should be displayed and how art should be viewed. Now, Walter Benjamin isn't happy about that. And the reason why he was making these arguments is because he wanted to say he doesn't find it good because it goes against these traditions. David Josselet, on the other hand, argues differently. And he says that, yes, it goes against these traditions, as it should, because we should be evolving. Art and culture should be evolving with technology, with society, with legislation, with all of these things that have evolved in the last century. Art is doing the same. So keeping all of these things in mind, something that I've thought a lot about recently, especially when thinking about, for example, NFTs or digital illustration or other art forms using technology, is the argument that art created online has an aura. Because when it is quote unquote reproduced, basically shared online, it's actually not being reproduced, but instead it's moving from one digital space to another. So it's not losing its aura. Basically, just to reiterate what I mean, part of what makes the aura is its mode of production, meaning that it was physically painted on a canvas by the movements of a human being. And the digitization of it takes away that physical aspect, which is a big part of the aura, if I would be going off of Benjamin's argument. Now, when the mode of production and creation is already online, basically replacing the paintbrush with a mouse or an Apple Pencil, does that mean that digital artworks are actually even more filled with their auras when digitally reproduced and disseminated? There is this artist I found when this whole NFT thing was being really hyped in the media. I mean, it's still being hyped in the media, don't get me wrong, but when it really began to boom. And his name is Nikos Probst. I found his works on Super Rare, and honestly, I don't know if you guys listening know what I'm talking about when I say that it was like ASMR. But for those who don't know, it's that feeling when you watch something or listen to something and it's this really weird, satisfying feeling. I mean, apparently it even triggers something in your brain and you just kind of feel like you don't want to stop looking at it or listening to it. And that's what some of his works did with me. It was really weird to experience that, and that this person had created these digital moving images and I was not wanting to stop looking at them. I've linked a few that have really made me feel that way in the podcast description, so go have a look and do let me know if you agree or if you think I'm absolutely crazy. But honestly, from a curator's point of view or also a collector's point of view, wouldn't it be cool to have an inexpensive screen installed on your wall? And just like people have neon light signs or, I don't know, an oil diffuser that lights up, but instead you have a small screen with an artwork moving around on it, I think that that would be way cooler than any neon sign. And I would definitely do that with one of the works by Nikos Probst. Or, for example, Sean Fan. She has really amazing pieces as well. And I would absolutely love to have one of her digital works basically displayed through a screen on my wall. But through all of this talk with ASMR and looking at art and reacting to it, I think that it's very interesting to think about how our brains actually react when viewing art through a technological lens. For those of you who already follow me on Instagram, this is not going to be news to you, but I'm going to mention it anyway. On the topic of online art viewing, there was a really interesting article I read in The Observer, and I mentioned it online a few months back. It's about a neuroscience study led by MIT professor Dr. Pawan Sinha in collaboration with QCM, a museum engagement platform, on the responses humans have when viewing a physical art object versus a digital representation of that object. The results were surprising in that when viewing art in 4 different ways, augmented reality, virtual reality, 2D digital image on a screen, and the original artwork, the digital reproductions in AR actually improve the brain activity of the participants in the study. There could be many reasons for this. The brain could be stimulated by the new experience of the immersive environments that AR technology makes possible, for example, and not necessarily the artwork in itself in a digital format. I think that these are all really, really interesting topics, and when discussing digital art or art online, I think a little bit of art historical knowledge goes a long way, despite how a lot of the conversation surrounding NFTs has gone in the past months. But this could be because the conversation currently is more commercial than anything else. My take on it, I think that digital art is great. And if I could afford it, I would purchase one and display it on a little screen on my wall somewhere. I would be fine with having an NFT. I think it's cool. And in addition to that, I also think that the NFT method of tracing ownership is beneficial for the artist. So although Benjamin would not have loved this development in the arts, I think that there are some great attributes to the methods used in the digital art space. Now, as I've said before, I think that the conversation is currently very central around commercial aspects of NFTs. And I think that it could be built out a little bit further to think about other ways within artistic discourse, art historical discourse, art theory, how these things could be interesting within the scope of NFTs and digital art. But yeah, that's my take on it. I'm not fully educated on the matter. I'm definitely not an expert when it comes to NFTs or digital art. I do think it's really interesting because I wrote my undergraduate dissertation on artificial intelligence in art, and I utilized a lot of art historical theories to look at what happens to authenticity when technology, and more specifically AI, is involved. But as usual, I would love to know what you think, so please reach out, DM me, let me know your opinions on NFTs, AI in art, viewing art online, Walter Benjamin, whatever. But otherwise, I really, really hope you enjoyed this discussion. And again, as always, thank you so much for listening. And that is it for today on All About Art. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave me a rating or a review, as it helps more people discover the show. Also, feel free to share with your friends, or if you share on social media, tag me and get in touch. Thank you so much for listening.